Hey there guys, so in today's video we are going to be getting back to some basics. Putting paint onto our paper. That's pretty basic, right? So I want to show you a couple of different ways of doing that. We're going to be taking a look at the basic flat wash, graded wash, and variegated wash, and I'll also kind of maybe throw in a couple of different ways of filling in some areas of your painting. So let's get started doing that. But hey, don't forget to hit subscribe, hit that little like button, and also if you want to see when I put up new content, go ahead and hit the notification bell as well. So let's get started slapping that paint down, having some fun. Let's head over to the easel and get started. Okay, so we are ready to start this little demo. I've got a Utrecht number 8 round sablette, holds a lot of paint and water, and it also releases that paint and water very nicely. A little paper towel for blotting. You want to pay attention to how much water is in your brush, and always have a paper towel on hand. I have a little palette with a couple of different colors. I'm going to start with this phthalo blue, and we're going to just get a nice juicy mix of that. I want to mix up enough paint to fill in this rectangle that I've drawn, and the paper I've got here is the backside of a failed painting. It's arches, and I'm just going to fill in this little rectangle with our first application, which is going to be a flat wash. Now it's very important to mix up enough paint to cover the area that you're intending to cover. You don't want to be stopping and mixing up more, because once you stop in the middle of a wash and you let it sit there for a minute, it starts settling into the paper, and then when you come back and continue on, you've got lines going through your wash. So in order to keep a nice even wash, you want to have enough paint to cover that area, and also a brush that's big enough. You want to have a brush that's almost too big, rather than struggle with a brush that's too small. So it makes sense. So the first thing we're going to do is just load this brush up, and I've got the tip of my brush up at that top line, but I'm holding it at a slant, and that makes it so the belly of the brush hits the surface of the paper. Now what you want to do here on this first stroke is make sure you have enough paint to form this puddle of water, which we're going to drag down that little rectangle. Once you see that puddle or that bead starting to disappear, you can be sure that your paint is getting too dry. So you want to come back in, load your brush up again, come to the bottom of that bead, and continue on down. Now I can see that I've got enough there on the paper, enough paint and water on the paper and in my brush to fill in all the way to the bottom of that rectangle. So that is a flat wash, and that's a very good, nice, even application. Sometimes there's a little too much water or a bead down at the bottom. If that's the case, I would rinse my brush of color, dry it off pretty well, and then just come with the very tip of my brush and let that thirsty brush soak up the excess water. But this isn't the case here. So that was a good wash. I had the right amount of paint. So the next one we're going to do here, another rectangle, and I'm just going to use the same brush, same color. This time I want it to be a graded wash, which means it's going to be darker at the top. In this case, you can do a couple of different ways on this. You can do dark going to light, or you can go light going to dark, or you can go dark light and going back to dark again. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to go dark to light. So I'm going to get a dark mixture here, and this is about a milk consistency. If you check out my video on paint to water ratios, you will get a better understanding of what I'm talking about when I talk about a milk consistency. So let's add a little bit more water, but I want this one to be a little bit thicker starting out. So I'm going to start out in the same way. Nice dark juicy mixture. Got my bead going. My board could be just a slight bit more slanted to help me drag that paint down with gravity as my friend. So now I'm just tipping my palette a little bit and adding water and thinning that mixture down. So when I come in with my next stroke, I've all of a sudden got less pigment on my brush. I'm going to rinse it again, get a little bit more water, and gradually bring that down. This time I'm going to rinse my brush and not add any more color to it. Dabbing off that excess water, and we're just going to bring that all the way down to the bottom. And you've got a graded wash. It's a little imperfect there. That's okay. That's why we practice. So we can try that again and see if we can't get a smoother transition from dark to light. Let's try that one more time. All right, so I've got my nice dark paint. Let's tip the board a little bit more. Nice juicy start. I'm going to rinse my brush of color, come back with some water to dilute my mixture a little bit more, and then I'm going to continue on down. I'm stopping right here, rinse my brush, put some more water in my mixture here, and continue to bring that down. Now it's about right here that I want to rinse my brush, dab off the excess, and just bring mostly water. And I dabbed off excess there and just am dragging it to the bottom. That was a much better transition from that dark to the light color. Okay, so that's two ways of adding your paint. Now we're going to talk about a variegated wash. A variegated wash is varied. So basically you've got, you can vary the value, you can vary the color, and those are a couple of different ways that you can do a variegated wash. So what we're going to do, oh, I want to show you one more thing. So also with just a straight wash, you can work on wet paper. Makes it a little bit less tense, I guess you could say, because you're not in danger of the moisture going away like up here. You want to keep your bead formed and there all the way through your wash. Here you're just going to do the same stroke basically, but now you've got wet paper. That had a little tint in it from my previous wash there. So I'm just going to grab paint out of this puddle, and keeping in mind that the water on the paper is going to dilute what's in my brush, so it's going to be probably lighter than that. You can add more paint to adjust for that, but we're just going to start at the top and come all the way down. Now I'm not so worried about that bead. I'm coming in with the same paint puddle and just bringing that all the way down. And because the paint is, or the paper is wet, I don't have to worry about those brush strokes. It's just going to dry smooth. I don't want to come back in anywhere with a damp brush to try to fix a spot or whatever the case may be, because then you're going to be in danger of blossoms or cauliflowers, watermarks, backruns. All those things can be referring to the same thing. So now let's come over here and we're going to do a varied wash. So I've got my rectangle. This time I'm going to vary it, but with 2 colors. I'm going to start off in the same way that I did with the wash. Just going to go ahead and use this color, but before I start adding any color, I want to get this beautiful Quinacradone magenta ready to go. Try to get it much the same consistency as that blue. And then we're going to come into our puddle here. Start the same way. We want to make sure we've got that bead formed nice and juicy. Continue to come down. Want quite a bit of a juicy mix here. Quite a good bead forming. So now we've got that nice bead that's right there. I'm going to rinse my brush off and come over here into my Quinacradone magenta, and I'm just going to come on up above that a little bit and start dragging it down with that bead of blue paint. Rinse my brush again, dabbed off the excess moisture, coming in with a little bit more of that Quinacradone violet, and continue. Then I'm going to rinse my brush one more time, get off that excess moisture, and come on down with more Quinacradone violet. I might have said Quinacradone magenta. I meant Quinacradone violet. Okay, so that's a varied wash. Not a perfect example, so maybe we'll try that one again. Let's just come over here and do that one more time. Just that transition in here isn't as smooth as I would have liked it, so let's see what happens when we try it again. A little practice on a basic application. So let's get that nice and juicy. I'm going to bring that magenta in a little bit sooner, and maybe just at the bottom of that instead of coming up to the top. A little bit smoother. And now let's grab some more of that magenta. I got a little bit thicker mixture there of the magenta. And all the way down. That's a little bit better. The transition from the blue and the magenta to more of the magenta could have been a little bit better. It was better here. This was better in the middle part. So those are the reasons why we practice. They're always going to be little imperfections, and we're not going for perfect. We're just trying to get an idea of what it looks like to get those transitions happening. Okay, so there's another way to do a varied wash, and this is basically charging in color. So let's come right here, do a little rectangle again, just to kind of keep them in a little order. This time we're going to do wet on wet, and I'm going to do one color and vary the value. So we've got our paper damp. I don't have a ton of water on the paper. It's damp. a little bit of a sheen. And I'm going to come in with my phthalo blue in a thicker mix up here. This is waterier, that's hard to say, waterier than this. So I'm just going to start with that. I'm going to rinse my brush off and come over here to this watery puddle, and it's going to be a little bit more diluted. Same, a little bit more water, and I can just touch in that lighter, really kind of a tea, a little bit darker down here maybe, and in that way we can vary our wash as well. So now we've got a varied value, variegated washes, and this is a variegated wash too, just a little bit more experimental, I guess you could say, but this is a really fun way to apply paint. You can do a lot with the variegated wash like that. Also, we can do multiple colors with our variegated wash. So let's come over here and do another rectangle. And this time I'm going to do the same thing, adding water first, and then I want to get a little burnt orange. It's kind of dry right there, but just a little bit of burnt orange. And I'm going to squirt out a little of this Nicolazo yellow into the green area. Okay, so now we've got it's still damp, it's still got a sheen. I'm just going to drop in a little of that burnt orange. Let's go with a little of the blue. Come in with the Nicolazo yellow. Look how that yellow pushes those colors away. Such fun. That is so fun. Funnest part of watercolor is watching what watercolor can do all by itself. Now I'm going to put in a little bit of this Hooker's green. Let's put it up there too. So basically that's charging in, right? You're just dropping in the color and you're creating a varied wash, a variegated wash when you do that. A little more. Now, if you don't mix these colors constantly, if you don't continue to brush the strokes, you're going to get paint that separates and you can see the individual colors, which is really cool. And let's come in with some more of that blue down here. This, in my opinion, is one of the funnest things in watercolor, is watching the paint move around and then when it dries to see what it's done. Okay, so now these little areas I've left open to show you a couple of brush strokes that you can use to fill in some smaller areas or big areas. It just depends on the brush that you use. So I've got clean water, and for the first little area, let's do this again. I'll just kind of do an organic shape so it's not quite so symmetrical. I'll do it over here too. Little squigglies. I'm going to use this Princeton wash brush. It's a 1/2 inch velvet touch, $39.50, and it's a flat. I do have a few flat brushes. I tend to use round brushes mostly, but flats are really good for certain techniques. And this one is called a connected stroke, and this brush is really good for that. So I'm going to go up into my little green puddle, grab some of that burnt orange, not worried about mixing the two in the same well. That burnt orange is going to naturalize my Hooker's green and Nicolazo yellow. So let's get a little bit more green in there. We want to, same idea, you want to make sure you have enough paint mixed up. It's not as important with this stroke because you might want to do several different colors with this method. So maybe I'll show you what that looks like too. So let's start with talking about what a connected stroke is. It's basically, I'll just get my paper towel before I start. So basically I'm brushing one way, flipping my brush, and doing kind of little X's. And just letting one stroke connect to the other stroke while it's still wet. And now that I got paint all over that, I got my new paper towel. So I'm starting with a wet brush and coming in, making sure I have enough paint to dip into and to reload my brush. Let's add a little bit more water to that. So between the three, I'll have plenty. So basically, I'm just gonna flip-flop my brush, crisscross the strokes, load my brush up again, and keep going. Now, I could get some of this blue. And since this paint is still wet, I'm just gonna continue to come in with that blue and connect those strokes. So I filled in an area of color pretty simply by flip-flopping my brush with connecting strokes, and then we'll let that sit and dry. Another stroke that you can use to fill in areas of color is a broad stroke. So a broad stroke is basically you're using the full belly of that brush, and you're not going to lift the brush from the paper so much. You're going to try to limit the amount of times that you lift that. So with this blue, I'm going to load up my brush, and then I'm going to just do a broad stroke, or yeah, broad stroke. And I could fill in that whole area with one brush load of paint. So that is a broad stroke. We saw the connected stroke. We saw the flat wash on dry paper, flat wash on wet paper, damp paper, moist paper. Not damp. Damp is when the sheen is gone, so don't forget that. Graded wash. Practice that a second time. A variegated wash. Did that twice as well, and now that I'm looking, this one looks better than this one. So I didn't think that was going to turn out as well as it did. And then we've got our variegated washes with two or different tones, different values. And then we've got our variegated wash with different colors. So those are some paint applications for you to experiment with and practice and practice and practice and practice. Put on some good music, pick some pretty colors, but please make sure you practice. So I hope that helps you guys, and don't forget to practice because we want to progress, and the only way to do that is by practicing. So don't neglect the practice. Also, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and like this video, and also that little notification bell will let you know when I put up new video. So happy painting, happy progressing, have a great day, and we will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.